Think of all the times you've used words today in your thinking, in your conversations. Now imagine if your use of words was limited to only what you've read. You could read the business section of the morning paper. Imagine if your vocabulary was limited to only words you learned from reading the business section. How horrible a life that would be. You couldn't tell anybody the story about what happened on the train on your way to work this morning. You could never tell anyone how you felt about your day. I think we can all agree that this would be a limited and boring life. Well, if your focus is only to read music and not to learn to really play music, your music, the world would feel pretty dull. Music is not about reading music, it's about feeling. In the same way, the world is not about discussing only the newspaper's business section. It's about expressing a wide range of concepts, emotions, and stories. Our course is about helping you express your unique form of music. You don't need to learn how to read music. Piano teachers often believe that reading music is difficult and important, so you have to start learning it early. The problem is that if you're trying to learn to read before you have a vocabulary, it can be really difficult to focus enough on learning the vocabulary. This is why children's books are written using mostly words children are familiar with. Not a lot of books for 5-year-olds dealing with tax policy or existential angst. Occasionally, kids might use letters to sound out a word, but generally, you're reading words, not letters. Acquiring a music vocabulary is a big job. By the time you were 1 year old, you had heard thousands of words being used creatively by people around you, and those words became your words. But with music, you might go an entire lifetime and never hear people around you creatively using the vocabulary of music. If you want to know more about the vocabulary of music, check out the video on this page called Audiation. But for now, let's talk more about what it means to read music. You'll be reading a note that looks something like one of these. The note consists of a note head like this, and it may or may not have a stem attached. The stem may or may not have flags or beams attached to it. A note might be rotated 180 degrees like this. Keep in mind that that's already a lot of details. And even though we're talking about reading music, nothing we're talking about so far is music. Music is sound organized in time, patterns of pitches combined with patterns of rhythm. That being the case, these notes we're talking about have to pull double duty. They show information about both pitch and timing. Both of these roles are equally important, but we can only talk about one thing at a time, so let's talk about pitch first. Pitch just refers to the kind of sound you're producing with your voice or other instrument. We call pitches high or low, even though those words are kind of an arbitrary way to describe them. On the piano, the keys here to my right produce what we call high pitches, and the keys on the left produce low pitches. So piano keys produce a certain pitch, and those note heads we talked about indicate a piano key to play. How they do that depends on where they're placed on a staff. But to understand what that means, you have to know the clef, which for piano music is usually a treble clef or a bass clef. And usually we'll have two staffs joined together like this, a grand staff. Every line in space in this grand staff indicates a white piano key. In the United States, where I am, we name them with letter names, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. You may want to pause to take a look at this, but you don't have to memorize it to continue with the video. And then there's a do signature, usually called a key signature, that further refines what the note head is telling you so you know exactly which key on the piano is meant by the note you're looking at, including whether it's black or white. Because remember, a letter name by itself refers to a white key. The key signature will show you which notes of which scale you're going to use when you're playing. For more information about scales, be sure to check out the video on music theory. For example, if you see this key signature, it means to use F sharp, not F, and C sharp, not C. If you don't know what a sharp is, that's okay. I'll be explaining that very shortly. In other words, you'll be using the piano keys from the D major scale. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D. Check out the music theory video for more about major scales. Most teaching methods try to make you count the number of sharps or flats in a key signature and memorize the order they come in. And that's not really how it works when we're reading music. We're not counting sharps and flats. Instead, we're hearing a resting tone and seeing which piano key to equate that with. The resting tone is kind of a reference pitch that all the sounds you're hearing in a piece of music point to. For this to work, you have to be audiating the printed music you're looking at. That means literally hearing it, even if only in your head, and understanding the notes you're looking at in terms of tonality and meter. There's more on that in the video on audiation. Audiation is a prerequisite skill for reading music, and it's a big focus of the Genesis method for learning piano. So counting sharps and flats in a key signature is not a musical skill. The musical skill is hearing what you see on the page in its tonality context. And after that, understanding the keyboard geography of the key you're playing in. And that's something I cover in my course. Major tonality uses a resting tone of Do, and a key signature tells you where Do is on the staff. So if the key signature looks like this, then Do is a D. That's what a key signature does. It shows you where Do is. And if Do is the resting tone, then you're in major tonality, which is this kind of musical soundscape. But a key signature doesn't tell you if Do is the resting tone. For that, you have to use the context of the actual printed music you're looking at. You have to hear it. For example, if you're in minor tonality, the resting tone is La. So if Do is here on the staff, then La is here. That's B minor. So it's important to remember that the key signature doesn't tell you much unless you're also looking at the actual notes in the music. You have to understand how those things sound together in order to read music. But back to our example. B minor uses the same piano keys as D major, just with a different overall sound. D major sounds like this. B minor sounds like this. So B minor in this case is called the relative minor of D major. And I talk more about that in the theory video. Or it could be E Dorian. Or G Lydian. Dorian and Lydian are names for other specific kinds of musical soundscapes called tonalities. And in this case, they all use the same piano keys, just with a different reference pitch, a different resting tone. The first key signature most people see is the key signature for C major, which has no sharps and no flats, which doesn't mean it's not a key signature. It's just a key signature that indicates only white keys, like the C major scale when you're in major. Or the A minor scale when you're in minor. As you can see, hearing and knowing whether you're in major or minor is a critical part of reading music. That's why we're focused on helping you learn to hear that, so you can be a better player and reader if you want to. An accidental placed to the left of a note tells you you're going to deviate from what the key signature is telling you. Accidentals are sharps, flats, or naturals. A sharp sign to the left of a note head indicates to play the very next key with no key in between to the right, whether it's black or white. So this is F, this is F sharp. There's more critical info on this in the theory video. A flat means to play the very next key to the left with no key in between, whether black or white. So this is B, this is B flat. This is F, this is F flat. A natural instructs you to play the white key indicated by the note head, again, depending on the clef. So even if you're in D major, which ordinarily means you'll be using F sharp, you play F if you see an F natural, a white key. It's hard to believe I've talked about so many complex details of music notation, but I've still said very little about music, let alone make any. So if you're confused, I don't blame you. There are so many sources you can go to who will give you hours and hours of content on details about how to read music. My point is that you don't have to. Reading in and of itself doesn't make you a better musician than somebody else who doesn't. Once you know about staff notation, you'll know which piano key to press based on the notes you're looking at. Unfortunately, that's still not music because it takes at least 2 pitches to convey musical meaning. One pitch by itself could be anything. That could be the beginning of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, or All by Myself by Eric Carmen that Celine Dion sang, or Old MacDonald, or the Jeopardy game show theme, or My Name Is by Eminem, or Killing Me Softly that Roberta Flack sang. Those are all songs we're going to be talking about later in this video. And they could all start with the same pitch, G in this case. And this is why mnemonic devices like Every Good Boy Does Fine rarely work. You have to learn 4 phrases: every good boy does fine, face, good boys do fine always, all cows eat grass, 1 phrase each for lines and spaces on the treble clef, and 1 each for lines and spaces on the bass clef. It's too many things to memorize, they usually get confused, and they don't convey anything about musical sound. Not to mention the subtle gender bias. So if you've never heard those before, count yourself lucky and forget I said anything about them. They tend to prevent you from seeing how music is functioning rather than helping. But once you have at least 2 pitches, your ear and mind will automatically start to place them in a context. That context is called a tonality. And I talk more about the importance of context in the audiation video. And those musical patterns of 2 or 3 or 4 pitches are called tonal patterns. Now we're getting closer to recognizing those songs I was talking about earlier. Here's one version of what the tonal patterns that start each of those songs looks like in music notation. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum. Bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum. Bum, bum. Bum, bum. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum. But we still don't have any rhythm, and we'll come back to that in a few minutes. Reading music usually doesn't mean naming each note and then finding its corresponding piano key, any more than reading a book means sounding out each letter. Instead, it's recognizing those tonal patterns, hearing them in context of tonality, and then playing those keys that produce those musical sounds. In a way, this is similar to how you read text. You don't read letters, you read words, and you hear those words in your head as you read them, whether you're reading out loud or to yourself. So I just want to reiterate, if you're not learning to hear music you're trying to read, you might not be learning to read.